I lay in that hospital bed, the smell of antiseptics stinging my nostrils, watching my son and his wife choose a Hawaiian sunset over my broken ribs. "We won't take care of you, Ruben," Jennifer said, her voice as cold as the IV fluid dripping into my arm. "Our vacation is more important." I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just smiled, reached for my phone with my one good hand, and deleted the $6,000 monthly transfer they'd been living on for 3 years. Within 4 hours, my phone was vibrating off the tray table. 87 missed calls. They had no idea that the real silence was only beginning. My name is Ruben Curtis. I'm 47 years old, a man who spent 40 years under the hoods of cars in Phoenix, Arizona, building a chain of auto repair shops with nothing but grit and grease under my fingernails. 3 years ago, I sold the business for $200,000. I thought I was set. I thought my family was my retirement. I was catastrophically wrong. The accident happened on a Tuesday. A drunk driver in a heavy truck ignored a red light at 40 miles per hour. My car spun like a toy, metal screaming against metal, before slamming into a light pole. I woke up at Banner Good Samaritan with 3 broken ribs, a concussion that made the world tilt, and a right leg that felt like it had been through a wood chipper. I called my son, James. I remembered him as a 7-year-old, wide-eyed, asking how engines breathe. Now he's a sales manager who pulls in $4,200 a month, a decent living, if not for his wife, Jennifer. "I'm at the gym, Dad," James told me when I called from the ER. "Can it wait an hour?" 4 hours later, they strolled in. Jennifer looked like she was heading to a photo shoot. Perfect blonde hair, designer athleisure, and a smile that never reached her eyes. James stood at the foot of the bed, hands in his pockets, looking like he was waiting for a bus. No flowers, no "I love you," just a heavy, awkward silence. "The doctor says I'll need help for a few weeks," I whispered, every word a serrated knife in my chest. "Physical therapy, someone to help me move around my apartment." Jennifer didn't even look at me. She was scrolling through her phone. "Ruben, we can't. We're leaving for Hawaii in a week. The resort, the private tours, it's all paid for. We've been planning this for months." I stared at my son. "James?" I was hit by a truck. He wouldn't meet my eye. "Jennifer's right, Dad. We can't cancel now. You're in good hands here. They have nurses for this." In that moment, the room went ice cold. I saw them clearly, not as my flesh and blood, but as parasites who saw me as an ATM with a pulse. They'd lived in a $680,000 house I'd signed over to them. They'd spent $280,000 of my money in 3 years, and they couldn't spare 7 days for the man who built their entire world. "I understand," I said, and I did. I understood exactly where I stood. Before I tell you how I dismantled their world, take a second to subscribe to the channel. Also, drop a comment and let me know. What time is it in your part of the world right now? I love seeing where our stories reach. The second they walked out, I went to work. I called a home care agency. $3,800 a month for a professional caregiver named Martha. Then I opened my banking app. For 3 years, $6,000 had moved from my account to James's like clockwork. I hit cancel. Then I blocked his account from ever receiving a dime from me again. The silence lasted until the 1st of the month. Then the dam broke. My phone became a weapon. Buzz, 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 text after text. "Dad, there's an error with the bank." "Dad, the mortgage, well, the taxes are due." "This isn't funny, Ruben. We have bills." I didn't answer. I sat in my Paradise Valley apartment, Martha bringing me tea, and watched the digital desperation escalate. Loneliness makes dangerous choices feel reasonable, but betrayal makes cold choices necessary. Jennifer showed up at my door 3 days after I was discharged. I watched her through the security camera. She was pounding on the wood, her face twisted. Martha, a professional with a backbone of steel, answered the intercom. "Mr. Curtis is resting," Martha said. "I'm his daughter-in-law. This is family business. If you don't leave, I'll call building security." I watched Jennifer stomp back to her car, a BMW I'd helped buy, and slam the door. It was the first time in years I'd felt a spark of genuine joy. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the power. For years, I'd been the silent financier of my own disrespect. No more. James tried a different tactic. He sent an email. 6 paragraphs of "we didn't mean it" and "we were under stress." He mentioned my granddaughter, Lindsay. He knew she was my weak spot. Lindsay is 12, smart, and the only person in that house who actually loves me. But even using her couldn't bridge the gap they'd created. I ignored it all. I was busy meeting with Gerald Porter, a shark of an estate attorney. "I want them out," I told him. "The trust, the inheritance, everything. I want it gone." Porter looked at me over his spectacles. "You're sure, Ruben? This is nearly $2 million. "I've already given them nearly $1 million in 3 years," I replied. "They've had their share. They spent it on Hawaii while I was spitting blood in a hospital. Give 85% to a foundation for accident victims. Put 15% in a locked trust for Lindsay for when she's 25. James gets the 0 he deserves." The paperwork was signed and notarized. I felt lighter than I had in a decade. But Jennifer wasn't done. She wasn't the type to let a gold mine stop producing without a fight. A week later, a certified letter arrived. It wasn't an apology. It was a declaration of war. James and Jennifer were petitioning the court to declare me mentally incompetent. They claimed the concussion from the accident had caused cognitive impairment. They had a letter from a Dr. Patricia Lansing, a friend of Jennifer's, claiming I showed signs of confusion and pathological spite. They wanted a guardian. They wanted control of my bank accounts. They wanted to turn me into a prisoner in my own home so they could keep their yoga memberships and spa days. Desire whispers louder than guilt, but greed screams louder than anything. I called Porter. "They're trying to take my mind, Gerald." "Let them try," he growled. "We're going to bury them in facts." I spent the next week being poked and prodded by the best neurologists and psychiatrists in Phoenix. I aced every test. I was sharper than a surgical scalpel. Porter filed our response, along with a counter-petition for malicious prosecution. The court date arrived. I dressed in my best suit, leaning slightly on my cane. James looked like a ghost, thin, gray, his suit rumpled. Jennifer was beside him, her jaw set like stone. The judge, Patricia Morrison, didn't look amused. She looked at the evaluation from their doctor and then at Porter. "Mr. Curtis," the judge said, looking at me, "have you ever met this Dr. Lansing?" "Never in my life, Your Honor." The judge's eyes snapped to James's lawyer. "Counselor, you submitted a mental health evaluation for a patient the doctor has never seen? Do you realize how close you are to a bar grievance?" The lawyer turned purple. James looked at the floor. Jennifer, however, stood up. "Your Honor, he's not himself. He's cutting off his only son. He's being vindictive." "I'm being observant," I said, standing up. "I realized my son and his wife only loved my balance sheet. When I was bleeding, they were packing for the beach. Is it incompetent to stop paying people who don't care if you live or die?" The judge didn't even go to chambers. Petition denied. Mr. Curtis is clearly of sound mind. Furthermore, I'm ordering the petitioners to pay Mr. Curtis's legal fees. $12,000 due in 60 days. Jennifer gasped. James put his head in his hands. They didn't have $12,000. They didn't even have the property taxes for the house I'd given them. The fallout was spectacular. Without my $6,000 a month, their house of cards collapsed. Jennifer had to get a job, retail, Scottsdale boutique. She hated it. She hated the customers, she hated the hours, and most of all, she hated James for losing their allowance. James called me a month later. "Dad, Jennifer's leaving me. She filed for divorce. She says she didn't sign up for this." "She signed up for the money, James," I said. "You just happened to be attached to the checkbook." He stayed silent for a long time. "I'm selling the house. I have to. I owe $30,000 in debts I can't pay. I'm moving into a one-bedroom. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I really am. I lost my father because I was too weak to say no to a woman who never loved either of us." "You lost more than that, James," I said. "But at least you're starting to find your spine." I didn't give him a penny. I watched him sell the house I'd built. I watched him pay off his debts and move into a place half the size of my apartment. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, letting my son fail, but it was the only way he'd ever become a man. 6 months later, there was a knock at my garage door. I was working on the Mustang, the engine finally humming. James was there, holding a box of pizza. Lindsay was with him, clutching a school report card. "We were in the neighborhood," James said, sounding nervous. "Lindsay wanted to show you her A in science." I looked at him. He looked different. The entitled softness was gone. He looked tired, but his eyes were clear. "The pizza's getting cold," I said, wiping my hands on a rag. "Come on in." We sat in the garage, the smell of oil and pepperoni in the air. We didn't talk about the money. We didn't talk about the lawsuit. We just talked about Lindsay's school and the way a V8 engine sounds when the timing is just right. It wasn't a total reconciliation. The trust stayed exactly as it was. James would still get nothing when I died, but for the first time in years he was my son again, not my dependent. He was earning his place back, one pizza and one conversation at a time. As they drove away in his beat-up Toyota, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known since before the accident. I'd lost a daughter-in-law, a lot of money, and a few ribs, but I'd gained my self-respect and, eventually, my son. Sometimes you have to burn the house down to see who's willing to stand in the ashes with you. If you enjoyed this journey of justice and redemption, please hit that like button and subscribe. It helps the channel more than you know. And remember, never let anyone treat your heart like a bank account.